Meh. The moment my mother opened the front door, she didn't say hello. She didn't smile. She looked past me, scanned the driveway, and the first words out of her mouth were, "You actually brought her." Not "Hi, sweetheart." Not "You made it." Just that. Flat. Disappointed. Like I'd shown up to a black-tie dinner in muddy boots. I was holding my 4-year-old daughter, Poppy, against my hip. She had fallen asleep in the car 20 minutes before we arrived, her cheek pressed against my shoulder, her small fist curled around the strap of my bag. I had driven 6 hours to get there, 6 hours with snack breaks and a toddler who asked, "Are we there yet?" approximately 47 times. "Of course I brought her," I said. "She's my daughter." My mother stepped aside to let us in, but barely. I had to turn sideways to get through the door. That was the moment I should have turned around. I know that now. But I didn't, because I had been telling myself the same story for years. That family was family, that things would get better, that this time would be different. I was 31 years old and I still believed that if I just tried hard enough, showed up enough, gave enough, eventually they would love me the way I needed to be loved. I was wrong. My name is Maya, and this is the story of the weekend that finally made me stop trying. I need to give you some background before I get into what happened, because without it, nothing makes sense. I'm a nurse. I've been working in the ICU for 6 years. The schedule is brutal, the emotional toll is real, and the pay, while decent, is not extravagant. I'm a single mom. Poppy's father left when she was 18 months old. No child support, no contact, no explanation beyond a text message that said, "I'm not ready for this life." So I built a life without him. I work 3 12-hour shifts a week. I bought a small house 2 years ago, and I raised my daughter on my own. I'm proud of that. I want to be clear about that, because what comes next might make it sound like I'm someone who doesn't have her life together. I do. It's just that, for a long time, I let the people who are supposed to love me unconditionally chip away at everything I built. My parents are not bad people in the way that word usually implies. They don't yell. They don't rage. They operate in a much quieter, much more exhausting register. They make you feel like a burden while simultaneously depending on you completely. They phrase requests like apologies. They say things like, "I hate to ask," and "I know you're busy," and then ask anyway, every single time, for things that go far beyond what any reasonable person would consider appropriate. It started small, the way these things always do. $100 here when my dad's car needed a repair. A few hundred there when their electric bill ran high. I was in my mid-20s, freshly graduated, happy to help. They were my parents. That's what you do. But then it wasn't small anymore. 2 years ago, my mother called me crying. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage. The number she gave me was $9,000. I didn't have $9,000 just sitting there. I took out a personal loan. I paid it. I didn't tell anyone because I was ashamed. Though looking back, I'm not entirely sure what I was ashamed of. Last year, my brother got engaged. His name is Derek, and he is 34 years old. His fiancée, Renee, is lovely. Genuinely, I mean that. She's one of those people who lights up a room just by being in it. They got engaged in October and immediately began planning a summer wedding. My mother called me the week after the engagement to let me know the venue deposit was due, and that they were a little short. A little short turned out to mean $8,000. I said yes, because Derek was my brother, because Renee deserved a beautiful wedding, because my mother cried and said, "We just want to give them something special," and I have never in my life been able to hold a boundary when my mother cries. I paid the deposit. And then, 2 months later, I paid the catering deposit. And then, the florist. By the time spring arrived, I had quietly contributed just under $15,000 to a wedding that my parents told everyone they were throwing for their son. Nobody thanked me. Not publicly. My mother said, "We'll figure out how to pay you back exactly once," and never mentioned it again. But that's not even what broke me. What broke me happened on the weekend of the wedding itself. I had driven up on Friday, the day before the ceremony, because my mother wanted help with setup and last-minute details. I packed Poppy's bag, loaded up the car, and drove those 6 hours with my daughter asleep in the back seat. When I pulled into my parents' driveway and my mother opened the door and looked at me like I had done something wrong just by bringing my own child, I felt something shift in my chest. A small, quiet warning that I ignored. Inside the house, the energy was tense. My dad was at the kitchen table doing a crossword and barely looked up when I came in. My aunt was arranging centerpieces in the living room. My cousin Tyler was on the couch playing on his phone. Nobody said much to me. Nobody offered to help me get Poppy settled. I found a quiet corner in the guest room, laid her down on the bed with pillows on either side, and went back out to help. For 2 hours I helped. I sorted seating cards. I assembled favor boxes. I steamed my mother's dress when she decided the dry cleaner had returned it with a wrinkle she couldn't tolerate. I did it all quietly, the way I always did, hoping the work would say what I couldn't. At dinner that night, we were all seated around the big table. My parents, Derek and Renee, my aunt and cousins, a few of Derek's friends. Poppy was next to me, eating the pasta I'd ordered for her from the kids' menu, mostly well-behaved except for one moment where she knocked over her water glass. It wasn't a dramatic spill. The glass was half empty. A few napkins sorted it out in 30 seconds. My mother looked at me from across the table and said, quietly but clearly enough for everyone nearest to hear, "Maybe she's a little young for this." I looked up. "She's 4. "I know how old she is," my mother said. "I just mean weddings are a lot. For little ones." I didn't say anything. I refilled Poppy's cup and helped her twirl pasta onto her fork and told myself it was pre-wedding stress. I was good at making excuses for the people I loved. Later that night, after Poppy was asleep, my mother came into the guest room where I was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through my phone. She closed the door behind her, which was never a good sign. "I want to talk to you about tomorrow," she said. "Okay," I said. "Renee's very particular about the ceremony. You know how she is. She wants everything to feel very curated." She paused. "We were thinking it might be easier if Poppy stayed here during the ceremony." I stared at her. Stayed here. Just for the ceremony. 2 hours, maybe 3. Mrs. Y. Albino next door said she'd be happy to sit with her. "You want my 4-year-old daughter to be babysat by the neighbor while I attend my brother's wedding? I'm not saying it like that. How are you saying it?" My mother sat down on the edge of the chair across from me and folded her, hands in her lap. "She's at an age where she might get restless. She might make noise during the vows. We just want the ceremony to go smoothly. You understand." I understood perfectly. The same way I understood when she looked past me at the front door. The same way I understood when she'd called Poppy's water spill a lot. My daughter was an inconvenience, and I had driven 6 hours and paid $15,000 to attend a wedding where my own child was considered an inconvenience. "She's your granddaughter," I said. My mother looked at me with an expression I can only describe as patient disappointment, the look she had perfected over decades. "I know that, Maya. Does Derek know you're asking me this?" A pause, long enough to be an answer. "This is coming from all of us. We just want tomorrow to be perfect." I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Poppy in the dark, listening to her breathe, feeling the particular weight of being someone who gives and gives and gives and still somehow ends up on the outside of every room. In the morning, I got Poppy dressed in the little yellow dress I had bought her specifically for the wedding. She had picked it out herself, pointing at it on the rack and saying that one. "Mama, it has buttons." It did have buttons. Pearl buttons down the front and a small sash that tied in the back. She looked beautiful. My mother saw us at breakfast and her expression flickered. Just for a second. But I saw it. I helped Poppy with her eggs and then I went to find Derek. He was in the backyard on a phone call. I waited until he hung up, and then I asked him directly whether he wanted Poppy at the ceremony. He looked at me for a long moment. "Mom said you were okay with her going to the neighbors," he said. "Mom said wrong," I said. He ran a hand through his hair. He had the same look he'd had as a kid when he was caught between two things and didn't want to choose. "Maya, it's just, Renee's been really stressed, and the seating..." "Derek? She's 4. She's my daughter. She has a dress with pearl buttons. I paid for this wedding." That last part came out before I could stop it. We both stood there for a moment. "That's not," he started. "Is she welcome or not?" I said. He didn't answer fast enough. I went back inside. I found my mother in the kitchen. I said calmly and clearly, "We're leaving." She turned from the counter. "What?" "Poppy and I are going home." I'm not leaving my daughter with a stranger so she doesn't disrupt your photographs. My mother's face went through several emotions very quickly. Surprise. Calculation. Then something that landed close to indignation. Maya, don't be dramatic. It's one afternoon. It's not about the afternoon. You're going to miss your brother's wedding. I know. After everything we've done to include you. I stopped. I turned around slowly. Everything you've done to include me. She didn't flinch. That was the part that got me. She said it and she believed it. Every dollar I had handed over, every loan, every deposit, every favor box I had assembled the night before. In her accounting, those were things she had allowed me to do. Inclusions, privileges. I paid for the venue, I said quietly. I paid for the catering. I paid for the flowers. I've given this family more money than I should ever have to explain. And you are telling me that you've done things to include me. Her chin lifted slightly. Money isn't everything, Maya. You're right, I said. It's not, which is why I'm going to stop giving you mine. I went to the guest room and I packed our bags. Poppy was confused and kept asking if we were going to see the bride, and I said we were going on a different kind of adventure, just the two of us. I strapped her into her car seat, folded her yellow dress carefully across the back seat, and I drove away. I did not look in the rearview mirror. My mother called 4 times before I reached the highway. I let them all go to voicemail. Derek texted once, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. My aunt sent me a message that said, "You really hurt your mother today," and I put my phone in the center console and didn't touch it for 2 hours. I stopped at a diner about halfway home. Poppy had pancakes and apple juice, and we talked about nothing, about the shapes of clouds outside the window, about what she wanted to name a hypothetical puppy, about whether butterflies sleep. It was the best 2 hours I'd had in months. That evening, sitting on my own couch in my own home, I did the math. I added up everything I could document, the transfers, the Venmo payments, the loan I'd taken out. The number was $18,400 over 3 years. I sat with that number for a while. I thought about what else I could have done with it. I thought about Poppy's college fund, which I had barely started. I thought about the vacation we'd never taken. I thought about all the things I'd told myself I'd do later, when things calmed down. 3 days passed. Then my mother appeared. Not a call, not a text. She drove 3 hours to my house, a distance she had apparently managed to cover in considerably less time than the 6 hours she always implied when I made the trip. She rang my doorbell on a Tuesday morning while Poppy was at preschool, and I had just come off a night shift. I opened the door in scrubs, having slept approximately 3 hours. She was holding a casserole dish. "I made your favorite," she said. "The chicken one." I looked at her. I looked at the dish. "Mom, can I come in?" I was so tired. That is the honest truth. I was tired in every sense of the word, not just from the shift, and I stepped aside and let her in because I didn't have the energy to do anything else. She set the casserole on the counter. She sat at my kitchen table. She looked around my house the way she always did, cataloging what was new, what had changed, filing it away. Then she looked at me. "I owe you an apology," she said. I sat down across from her. "Okay, I handled the situation with Poppy badly. I should have spoken to you privately, earlier and not the night before." I waited. "We love Poppy," she said. "You know that." "I'm not sure I do know that," I said. "I'm not sure she does either." My mother looked briefly pained. "That's not fair." "What number do you think is fair, Mom? Of the $18,000 I've given this family in 3 years, what amount buys fair?" She was quiet for a moment. "We've been going through a hard time. You've been going through a hard time. You've been going through a hard time for 10 years. Every year there's a different hard time. And every year I find a way to help. And every time I help, nothing changes. You never ask how I'm doing. You never ask how Poppy's doing. You call when you need something. That's the pattern." "That's not true. When did you last call me just to talk?" I asked. "Not to ask for anything, just to hear my voice." She opened her mouth, closed it. "I'm not angry, Mom. I'm just done pretending I don't see it." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her eyes were wet. "We need you, Maya. We love you." I looked at her hand on mine. I thought about all the times I had needed her, and she had been too exhausted, too distracted, too consumed by whatever crisis was current. I thought about the week after Poppy's father left, when I called her sobbing, and she spent most of the conversation telling me about a problem she was having with a neighbor. I thought about how I learned to stop calling. "I love you too," I said, "but I can't keep being the solution to every problem. I have a daughter. I have a life. I'd been so focused on making sure everyone else's life is stable that mine has been standing still." She wiped her eyes. "We'll pay you back." "The money." "I don't want it back," I said. "I'm releasing it. But I'm not giving more, not for a while. Maybe not ever. I need to figure out what I actually have left." She nodded slowly. Something in her face shifted, something more complicated than sadness, something that looked a little like recalculation. "We're thinking of doing a big New Year's gathering. Your uncle's in from Phoenix. It would mean a lot to everyone if you came." "Brought Poppy." I looked at her. "It would be your dad's treat," she added. "He wants to take everyone somewhere nice. That seafood place downtown." I had heard this before. Not this exact version, but this shape. The invitation that comes wrapped in warmth and lands as an obligation. The dad's treat that dissolves when the bill arrives. "I'll think about it," I said. She smiled. She patted my hand. She stood up and smoothed her blouse and said the chicken just needed 30 minutes at 3:50. She drove away, and I stood at my kitchen window watching until her car disappeared. Then I went to my laptop, opened my bank's website, and removed my parents from the list of approved external transfers. It took 4 minutes. It was the most useful 4 minutes of my year. I didn't go to the New Year's gathering. I sent a text that said, "Poppy's not feeling well. Hope you all have a wonderful time." My mother responded with a sad face emoji. My dad didn't respond at all. Derek sent a gif of a firework, which I chose to interpret as goodwill. I spent New Year's Eve on my couch with Poppy. We made a blanket fort. We ate popcorn and watched a movie about a dog who finds her way home. When midnight came, Poppy was asleep against my side, her mouth slightly open, her hair fanned out on my shoulder. I kissed her forehead. I thought about everything that year had cost me, not just the money, though that was real, but the energy, the hope I kept recycling into situations that couldn't hold it. The version of myself that kept showing up, suitcase in hand, believing that this time would be different. I thought about the look on my mother's face when I said I was done giving. Not devastation, recalculation. I thought about Poppy, who would grow up watching how I moved through the world, what I allowed, what I walked away from, what I decided I deserved. I turned off the TV. I listened to her breathe. Some doors you don't close in anger. You close them quietly, gently, the way you'd close a door when a child is sleeping. Because the noise isn't necessary. Because you've already said everything that needed to be said. Because finally, for the first time in a very long time, you understand that the most important room in the house is the one you're already in. I pulled the blanket up over both of us. I closed my eyes, and I let the year end without asking anything of anyone. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long. 31 years old, a job that requires me to make life and death decisions in a matter of seconds, a house I bought on my own, a daughter I'm raising without a single hand to hold at the end of a hard night. And yet I kept walking back into the same rooms, expecting different air. The honest answer is that intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing. I knew on some level what was happening. I could see the pattern clearly enough when I described it to my coworker at the hospital, watching her eyes go wide at the numbers. But knowing something and being willing to act on it are separated by something much harder than information. They're separated by the willingness to grieve, to look at a relationship you love and accept that it was never quite what you believed it to be. What I've come to understand is that the consequences we experience in life are rarely dramatic or sudden. They accumulate. Every time I wired money without being asked how I was doing, I was teaching the people around me what I was worth to them. Every time I rearranged my life to fill a gap that should never have been mine to fill, I was confirming that the arrangement was acceptable. I wasn't a victim of my family's choices alone. I was a participant. Not because I was weak, but because I had confused endurance with love and sacrifice with worthiness. The moment I drove away from that house, Poppy in the back seat in her yellow dress with the pearl buttons, the wedding I had largely paid for continuing without us, Something shifted. Not dramatically. There was no music, no revelation. I was just a tired woman on a highway who had finally decided that her own life deserved the same care she had been pouring into everyone else's. Moral clarity, I've learned, doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the act of doing something ordinary with great intention. Removing my parents from my bank transfers took 4 minutes. It was the simplest thing I had done in years. And that simplicity told me something, that the right decision rarely requires convincing. It just requires honesty about what you already know. Raising Poppy means she will one day watch how I handled this. She'll see what I walked toward and what I chose to leave behind. That is the most serious responsibility I carry. Not the mortgage, not the shifts, not even the loneliness of doing everything alone. It's the example. Because children don't learn who they are from what we tell them. They learn it from what we model, quietly, in the everyday decisions we think they aren't watching. I don't carry anger about any of it anymore. What I carry instead is clarity, and a blanket fort memory of New Year's Eve, my daughter asleep against my side, the world outside doing whatever it does, and the two of us entirely enough.